Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm Josh Strife Hayes, and this is a complete beginner's guide to Dark Souls 1. If you've never played Dark Souls 1 before and want to try, or you've tried and given up because of how unforgivingly brutal the game is, then don't worry. I'm going to go over everything you could ever want to know and prepare you for the harrowing journey ahead. This will be an extremely long, in-depth guide, so if you know what area of the game you're struggling with, you can skip to it using the timecodes in the description below. If you're new to this world, I suggest you grab an Estus flask, settle in, and watch the whole thing. This guide won't contain any story spoilers, locations of important items, or the fates of certain NPCs. I'm not going to hold your hand through the game. What I am going to do is explain all the mechanics you'll face and let you know all the abilities you have access to, so you're fully equipped and able to succeed against any challenge you'll face. This is not a walkthrough, it's preparation. Before we begin, it's important we quickly discuss the various versions of Dark Souls 1 that exist. The game is currently available on PlayStation 3 and 4, Xbox 360 and Xbox One, PC and Nintendo Switch. The first version of the game was simply called Dark Souls, then the expansion pack Artorias of the Abyss was released. A version of the game was then released that came with the expansion pack already included and was known as the Prepare to Die edition. More recently, the game has been remastered and is simply called Dark Souls Remastered. If you are a PC player, it's highly recommended to play using a gamepad or controller, not mouse and keyboard. While the game is technically playable using the mouse and keyboard combo, you'll find it much harder. During this guide, for ease of reference, I'll be using the button names first for an Xbox 360 controller and then a PlayStation gamepad. For the purpose of this guide, the specific version you're playing will not matter. There may be some small PvP changes and bug fixes in later versions, but the core gameplay remains essentially unchanged. Now that's out the way, let's begin talking about the game. 1. Movement and character controls. Dark Souls is a third-person action game, meaning you'll have the camera focused behind your character the majority of the time. The camera can be freely controlled using the right analog stick, useful for peeking around corners or trying to spot enemies hidden above or below you. Manipulation of the camera will be vital to surviving combat encounters. Knowing where all enemies are at all times will be the difference between life and death. The left analog stick will control your character. Holding down B or circle while moving will allow you to run. While running, your stamina bar, the green bar in the top left, will drain. It will refill slowly and constantly whenever you're not running or blocking. Tapping B or circle while moving, instead of holding it down, will let you roll. Rolling also uses stamina. Rolling can only be done in 4 specific directions: rolling forwards, backwards, left, or right. Dark Souls 1 did not have omnidirectional rolling like Dark Souls 3. Rolling is useful for avoiding enemy attacks or dodging traps. Pressing B or circle while standing still will cause you to jump backwards, again using stamina. This is good for luring an enemy into attacking you and then dodging quickly out of the way. To jump in Dark Souls 1, you must begin moving, then hold B or circle to run, then at the moment you want to jump, release B or circle, then quickly tap it again. This method is widely considered awkward to get used to, but jumping is needed to access some hidden areas of the game. Ladders can be climbed by simply facing them and interacting with them. When at the top of a ladder, you can either climb down slowly or hold B or circle to quickly slide all the way down. That's your basic movement set. It may not seem like much, but it'll be enough to get you through everything. Next, let's take an in-depth look at inventory and item management. Inventory and equipment management. During your journey, you'll collect items, equipment, or weapons to be stored and used. Let's look at the awkward systems you'll have to deal with. Any and all items in the game world will appear as glowing white spots of light on the floor. You won't have any indication of what an item is until you walk over and pick it up. Once collected, all items will be placed into your inventory. Press Start to open the menu in the top right-hand corner. An important note is that Dark Souls 1 does not pause when the menu is open. The enemies and other invaded players will continue to be active. Time does not stop, meaning you should find somewhere safe before doing any sort of inventory management. The menu in the top right contains 4 tabs: Inventory, Equipped Items, Character Status, and Game Options. You cycle through these tabs using the left and right shoulder buttons. Let's break it down and explain every tab individually. 1. Complete Inventory. This tab will list every item you have, broken down into the various subsections shown here. You can switch between the subsections using the left and right directional pad buttons. On any subsection, you can then use the up and down directional pad to scroll through the items you have available. When on any individual item, press the blue or square button to expand the item information, giving you a more detailed description. Some items can be used directly from the inventory by selecting them with the green A or X button and choosing Use. Some items, however, must be equipped and used during gameplay. On the right-hand side, you'll see your character status stats. We'll discuss this later. 2. Equipped Items. Press the right shoulder button to switch to the Equipped Items tab. Here you can see what your character is actually wearing and ready to fight with. Every slot on this screen shows where you could potentially equip an item you have. Clicking on an empty slot will bring you up a list of items you have on you that could be placed there. The top 2 left slots are your main hand weapons. You can have up to 2 main hand weapons equipped at a time and are free to switch between them during combat. We'll look at how to do this later. Underneath are your 2 offhand slots. Again, you can have up to 2 offhand items equipped and available to switch between at any time. It is suggested to have an attacking type weapon, such as a sword or an axe, in your main hand slot, and a defensive type weapon, such as a shield or parrying dagger, in your offhand. However, you can have any combination you want. Some will just prove far more effective than others. For this guide, I'm going to have a sword equipped in my main hand and a shield in my offhand. The 4 bottom left slots are your armor and relate from left to right to your helmet, main torso, hands, and feet. You can mix and match any armor sets and equip whatever you find. Have fun experimenting and finding a look that you like. The bottom right 2 slots are your rings. You can have 2 rings equipped at any time. You'll find rings hidden throughout your journey. They are very rare and very powerful. The top 5 slots are used for items and will become your quick use in-game items, available to be switched between and used without opening the menu. I'll explain that later in this section. It's highly recommended to have commonly used items placed here, such as Estus flasks, humanity, homeward bones, or bombs. The slots underneath items are for arrows or bolts, ranged ammunition used by bows and crossbows. You can have 2 different types of arrows and 2 different types of bolts equipped at any time and can then switch between them in-game. This is only used when fighting with a ranged weapon, which I'll discuss in the combat section of this guide and isn't recommended. Now you know how to put items into slots, it's important to know why you'd equip specific items, so we need to look at an item's stats. Let's break it down and start with weapons. Select one of the 2 main hand slots and you'll be shown a list of all carried items you could equip there. Just like the main inventory list, you can scroll through this list using the directional pad. When you have a weapon selected, press the blue button, or square, to bring up a more detailed breakdown of everything that weapon can offer. This is a lot of information, so let's go over everything shown here. Attack type and weapon type. This lets you know exactly what kind of attack to expect when wielding this weapon. This is less about enemy weaknesses and more about player preference. Thrusting is useful when in narrow corridors, while slashing is better for sweeping and hitting lots of closely grouped enemies. each player will end up naturally favouring a certain weapon type. ATK, or attack. Attack is all the attack information broken down into subsections, showing how much damage a hit from this weapon will do and where exactly that damage is coming from, along with any bonus damage that will be granted if a critical hit is scored. Physical is simply damage caused by the weapon hitting the enemy. Magic, fire, and lightning is additional elemental damage also inflicted if the hit connects, and critical is the added bonus for a parry and riposte or a backstab, which is explained in the combat section of this guide. Underneath, you'll see parameter bonuses. This is also known as scaling and is extremely important. Put simply, scaling means a weapon will increase in power with you as its parameter bonus skill increases. The skills are strength, dexterity, intelligence, and faith, and scaling is graded with a letter scale from A to E, A being the best and E being the worst. Melee weapons will mostly benefit from strength and dexterity, and magical weapons will focus on intelligence and faith, although exceptions do exist. If a weapon has any scaling, you'll gain bonus damage based on the scaling letter grade and your own level in that scaled stat. The bonus damage gained will be shown in the attack info on the right hand side as a plus in brackets number. Because of this, a scaled weapon is often much better than a non-scaled static weapon, because a scaled weapon will constantly get stronger with you. Underneath parameter bonuses, you'll see auxiliary effects. These are additional things the weapon will apply to an enemy whenever a hit lands. The higher the number, the more severe the effect. The effects listed are: bleed. As the bleed effect is applied, a bleed bar will slowly begin to fill up. When the bleed bar is full, the enemy will suffer from blood loss and instantly take a massive amount of damage. Poison. Poison, or the more severe form known as toxic, causes slow but constant loss of life until the poison wears off or the poison is cured. Divine. Divine damage can stop certain undead creatures from resurrecting after death. Occult. Occult is the weakest of all the auxiliary effects and has limited uses. It can sometimes cause slightly more damage to some boss monsters. On the right hand side, you'll see the damage reduction percent panel. These numbers relate to the amount of damage you'll avoid if blocking an attack using this item. All items have this defensive information, not just shields, because due to complex combat mechanics and gameplay choices, you might end up blocking with a sword sometimes. For the purpose of this guide, let's keep it simple. Return to the equipped items main screen by pressing B or circle, then select one of your offhand item slots. Scroll through your list of available items until you find a shield, then press blue X or square to expand the item information. The damage reduction panel shows how much of an enemy's attack will be absorbed by the shield on a successful block for each given damage type. Physical damage comes from the majority of enemies simply hitting you with non-magical weapons. If your chosen shield has a 100% physical damage block, you'll be able to avoid all physical damage by hiding behind it. If that number is any less than 100%, you'll need to remember physical attacks will not be fully negated by this shield. Magic, fire, and lightning are all elemental type damages, and often you will never have a 100% shield, meaning if you block a fireball with a shield, you'll most often still have to take some damage. The final number, stability, is related to how much stamina you'll have to use when blocking an attack. The higher the stability, the less stamina it will take. Blocking will be explained more thoroughly in the combat section of this guide. Under damage reduction percentage, you'll see required parameters. This shows you what your stats must be before you can use this item successfully. The stats again relate to strength, dexterity, intelligence, and faith. If you're looking at a weapon that you are capable of using, all these numbers will appear white. If your skills are not high enough to use that weapon yet, the number will appear red. However, the game will still allow you to equip the weapon, but when you try and attack with it, your attack will be sluggish and slow and cause very little damage to the enemy. We'll look at how to level up stats in the bonfire section of this guide. The final item stats are durability and weight. Durability will go down as the weapon or armor is used, and at 0 will become unusable until the weapon or armor piece is fixed at a blacksmith or a bonfire. A weapon with 0 durability will deal up to 85% less damage, and armor will provide no bonuses. Weight will greatly affect your character's movement. You will only be affected by the combined weight of items you have equipped, not items simply in your inventory. Your weight will determine the speed of general movement and the speed and style of your roll, discussed more in the combat section of this guide. That's the main hand and offhand item info, using a weapon and shield as an example, but armor itself has different information. Return to the main equipment screen, select an armor piece slot, such as helmet, then press the blue X or square button to expand the information for each potential helm. The left side of this screen shows you how much physical defense the helm will provide, broken down into individual strike, slash, and thrust defensive values. Then the magical, fire, or lightning defense values. The higher these values, the better. If you find you're losing a fight against an enemy with a large slashing sword, it may be worth finding an item you have with the highest slash defense. The right-hand side shows you 4 additional pieces of information. Poise. This is an in-game number showing your resistance to being knocked back or stunned when you receive a large hit from an enemy. If you have low poise, then hits might push you back or cause you to stumble. High poise allows you to remain stable and tank your way through many damaging blows. Bleed resist. Remember we talked about weapons causing bleed damage to enemies, filling up a bar, then inflicting a huge amount of damage in one go? Well, you can be the victim of that too. The higher your bleed resist number, the slower that bleed bar will fill up. Poison and curse resist work the same way. The higher your resistance, the longer it will take for poison or curse to affect you. Avoiding curses is essential, as once you're cursed, the game gets much harder. Curses are discussed at the end of this guide. 3. Character status. Now we've covered everything in the equipped items, pressing the right shoulder button again will switch you to the Character Status tab. This contains all the accumulated information about your character, from either their personal stats or the combined weapon and armor bonuses they currently have. While on this personal status screen, you can press Y or triangle to switch between the 2 different display modes. I'm going to focus on the mode without the player picture. The left-hand panel here will list your name, any covenant you're a part of and your rank in it, then your current level, all the souls you're holding, and then your complete character stats. You can press the back or select button for a highlighted explanation of all these numbers, but I'll break them down quickly here. Vitality is your life and increases the size of your red health bar. Attunement is used by magic users and increases the number of attuned spell slots you can have. Endurance increases both your green stamina bar and total equip load and bleed resistance. Strength is your main melee damage attack stat. Dexterity is needed for some weapons and also boosts attack. Resistance is useless, don't level it, ever, I'm being serious. Intelligence is needed by mages to cast spells and increases spell damage. Faith is needed to cast miracles and is involved in some damage scaling. Humanity is discussed in depth in the Humanity section of this guide. The middle panel shows your total hit points, or HP, your total stamina, and then your equip load. This is the combined weight of all equipped items. If this number exceeds the maximum you're able to have, you'll be forced to slowly walk everywhere and will lose the ability to roll. As your equipped item load decreases, your movement and roll speed will increase. Your attack values here show how much damage you'll do with the first and second weapon equipped in your right and left hand. Often your left weapon 1 and 2 will show a low attack stat, because your left weapon is most likely to be a shield. The bottom of this panel shows all total defense from all equipped armor. The numbers in brackets afterwards is what you would have with all armor and weapons removed, your base defense. The right-hand panel lists your total poise, which reduces the effect of enemies knocking you back, your build-up resistance to bleed, poison, and curse. Item discovery boosts the chance of finding items on a defeated enemy and can be increased by having active humanity or using certain short-time items such as golden coins. Item discovery will only affect the chance an enemy will drop something, and it won't change in-game items already in the world. Attunement slots are for sorcery users, and simply means you can remember more magic spells and switch between them freely. That's all of the personal status tab explained. Pressing the right shoulder button again will let you explore the in-game options, which I'm not going to discuss in this guide. In-game display. Once you've got your weapons, armor, and items assigned in the equipment menu, let's talk about what you're going to see during regular gameplay. In the bottom left corner, you'll see 4 panels. These panels are controlled by the directional pad. The left panel is your offhand item, and pressing left on the D-pad will cycle through both offhand items, likely shields, you have equipped. The right panel is your main hand item, and pressing right on the D-pad will cycle through the 2 main hand items you have equipped. The bottom panel is your quick use item slot, and contains the 5 items you placed into the quick use item panel in the equipment menu. Pressing down on the D-pad will cycle through these 5 items, and pressing the blue X or square will use that item. If it's an Estus flask, you'll drink it. If it's a bomb, you'll throw it, and so on. The top panel are your currently attuned spells. You can cycle through your available spells by pressing up on the directional pad, and you can then cast that spell by attacking with a magical spell-focused weapon. In the top left, you'll see a number, most likely 00. This shows how much soft humanity you currently have. Humanity is explained later in this section. To the right, you'll see your red health bar and green stamina bar. Your health will decrease whenever taking damage from any source and will not refill naturally. Your stamina is used whenever you sprint, roll, jump, attack, or block, and will recover quickly whenever not blocking, and very slowly if you constantly hold up your shield to block. Underneath those bars, you may see some small symbols. These relate to any passive buffs you're currently receiving. Up arrows are positive, and down arrows are negative. In the bottom right, you'll see your current soul count. You'll receive souls whenever killing an enemy or using a found soul item. You'll use souls to level up at a bonfire. If you die, you'll drop all your souls. Death is explained later in this guide. Returning to humanity, let's explain how that works. In Dark Souls 1, you start as an undead. If you can manipulate the camera to see yourself, you'll notice you're a zombie. You've been cursed with the Dark Sign, the ability to never truly die. On your death, you'll just keep getting sent back to a bonfire. But this takes its toll on you and makes you look like, well, that. However, you're not insane yet, and you can cling to the last of your humanity. As you kill enemies, that number will slowly increase. You can also find items called humanity, which look like little black spirits, and using these items will completely restore your health and increase that number by 1. As you progress through the game, you'll gain the ability to reverse your hollowing. This is done by offering one of those numbers, the soft humanity, to a bonfire. Simply rest and select reverse hollowing. When you do reverse the hollowing, you'll return to a human-looking state and have slightly increased health, giving you an advantage. However, you can now be invaded, which is discussed later in the PvP section of this guide. Combat. Combat is what Dark Souls is famous, or more correctly, infamous for. The game contains a brilliant, brutal and deep combat system that's punishing for beginners and exploitable for experts. It's tactical and unforgiving. It's complicated enough to need its own guide video, so that's what I'm going to do, but for now, I'll explain the basics, enough to give you a fighting chance. We'll look at the combat basics such as hitboxes and playing defensively, then melee, range and magic, discussing the attacks we've got available to us and when to use them. Many players say Dark Souls is hard. This is slightly paradoxical because while it is unforgiving, it's not unfair. You'll be punished for mistakes, but rewarded for correct decisions. So let's learn about the moveset we have available. I'm going to explain this from the view of a melee fighter first, then a mage. Step 1. Learning the moveset. You can hold any weapon with 1 or 2 hands. To switch between the single or two-handed grip on the main hand item, simply press yellow Y or triangle. For this basic guide, we'll focus on single hand weapon style using a longsword. All weapons have a quick but weak attack linked to the right shoulder button or R1. You can chain quick attacks together as long as you don't run out of stamina. Each attack usually moves you forward slightly. All weapons also have a stronger but slower attack linked to the right trigger or R2. Again, these can be chained together but also use up more stamina. We refer to these as light attacks or heavy attacks. You can chain light and heavy attacks together too. Each attack will flow smoothly into the next, light or heavy. You don't need to mash the buttons as fast as you can, simply press them at a controlled, correctly timed interval to start the next attack. When you commit to an attack, either light or heavy, you cannot stop the animation. The process of interrupting a video game animation to add another skill quickly is known as an animation break. You cannot do that in Dark Souls. You will have to complete the attack. This is often the gameplay mechanic that makes gameplay feel sluggish or unresponsive to players. They're annoyed they pressed attack, then instantly change their minds, yet they have to watch the original attack complete. It's also what makes the combat so tactical. You should not commit to a move until you're sure you want it to happen, and can deal with being locked out of further choices until it has happened. Along with the basic light and heavy attacks, you can move, sprint or roll, and you'll perform different attacks, adding a light or heavy attack to the end of any of these movements. Standing still and attacking with a longsword, sprinting and light attacking with a longsword, or rolling into a light attack from a longsword. All produce different attacks. The same is true for any weapon held in 2 hands, meaning at any moment in Dark Souls, you have a huge amount of attacks available to you. Every weapon has a different light or heavy attack moveset, producing different light or heavy attacks from standing, sprinting, rolling, or blocking. It's this abundance of moves and skills that makes the combat so deep, and the animation and attack commitment lock that makes it so tactical. If you approach this game as pure action, spam attacks and win, you're going to die. It's much more like a very fast game of chess, where making the right move at the right time is the key to victory, not simple, raw aggression. Once you've picked a weapon and discovered its moveset, knowing what light or heavy attack will do in any situation, it's time to go to Step 2. Step 2. Assessing combat. Most action games will have taught you that charging headlong into any and all fights will win, and while that's definitely a tactic here, it's often not the best. Each fight in Dark Souls, even with small and easy beginner enemies, can kill you, and so you'll need to think it through. Getting surrounded is always bad, so keep your enemies in a group and keep moving so they stay that way. When approaching an enemy, you can press the right analog stick in like a button, or R3, to lock on to the enemy you're looking at. If there's a group, you can switch the lock-on target by flicking the right analog stick quickly in the new target's direction. Once the group has been assessed, it's time to start thinking defensively. Step 3. Blocking and counter-attacking. When you commit to an attack, you are vulnerable. If the enemy has been winding up for a huge hit and you decide to attack, you're going to have no way to stop or avoid your own attack animation, meaning if you attack at the wrong time, you'll have no choice but to take any incoming damage. This is probably the single biggest reason new players fail at Dark Souls combat. They attack regardless of the tactical situation and then have to face the consequences of attacking a well-defended enemy or committing to an attack animation at the wrong time. This means attacking should be saved for the opportune moment, and at all other times you should be playing defensively. With a shield equipped in your offhand, holding the left button, or L1, will hold it up in front of you and block incoming attacks. It will reduce the damage by whatever % damage reduction your shield was showing back in the equipment information screen. Blocking an attack will use some stamina, and your stamina will recharge much slower while you're actively holding up a shield. Once an enemy has been successfully blocked, they'll often recoil backwards. That's the moment to strike back. The enemies follow the same rules as you. They're also locked into attack animations, meaning once they begin that sword swing, you can move, roll, or block, and influence the next moment in combat. Attempting to block an attack with an empty stamina bar will cause the enemy to stagger you, knocking you back and leaving you vulnerable. Learn to drop your shield and allow your stamina to recharge faster. Then hold it up only for the incoming attack. Holding up a giant shield, blocking all damage, and waiting for a time to attack back is a perfectly fine tactic and will serve you well. But to truly master melee combat, you'll need to learn how to parry. Step 4. Parry and riposte. The parry and riposte is one of the most powerful melee combat skills in all of Dark Souls, and it works like this. Certain offhand weapons, mainly shields and the parrying dagger, will perform a parry action when you press the left trigger, or L2. It's the offhand version of a heavy attack. Main hand weapons have light and heavy attack, offhand shields have block or parry. When you press the parry button, a few things happen. I'm going to slow this footage right down and explain how all this works in detail. All attacks, both yours and the enemy's, consist of 3 main phases: the wind-up, the moment of contact, and the recovery. A heavy attack may involve you bringing your sword back to your head ready to swing. This is the wind-up, and causes no damage. Then you swing forward and hit. This is the moment of impact. Then you return to the basic stance, ready for the next attack. This is the recovery. Notice that all this happens within a few seconds, and all 3 sections make the complete animation. How does this relate to parrying? Well, pressing parry will first cause the wind-up animation. You'll bring your shield across your chest or your dagger up to block. During these few frames, the parry is not active yet, and all incoming attacks will be taken as normal, harming you. Then, the parry frames will begin. The parry is now active, and will only last for several milliseconds. For the parry to be successful, the enemy's moment of impact, the exact moment their weapon connects with you, must happen during these active parry frames. And 3, the recovery. If the parry was not successful, there will be several milliseconds at the end of the animation. You won't be parrying, and you won't be able to parry again. It only lasts a very short amount of time, but it's still a moment that you are vulnerable for. If you can time your active parry frames to coincide with the exact moment of impact the enemy would hit you, that is a successful parry. You'll hear a very specific noise, the attack will be knocked away, you will take no damage, and the enemy will stumble backwards. You now have slightly less than 2 seconds to perform a riposte. To do this, simply be right next to a recently parried enemy and press light attack, either the right shoulder button or R1. You cannot riposte using heavy attacks. A successful parry and riposte will hit the enemy for massive damage, and during the riposte animation, you are immune to all incoming attacks. You can parry and riposte almost every enemy of roughly human size and shape. If you attempt to parry and just miss the parry frame window by a few milliseconds, you may perform a partial parry. You will still block the majority of the damage, but you will not push the enemy back. Remember the critical damage stat of weapons we looked at earlier? The higher that stat is, the more damage they will take from a successful parry and riposte. Step 5. Backstabbing. There's another way to achieve the immense damage of the riposte without the complexity of the parry, and this just involves getting directly behind the enemy. You can backstab almost all roughly humanoid enemies. Simply be right behind them, directly against them, and press light attack, the right shoulder button or R1. A backstab will lock you into the backstab animation, but you'll be immune to all incoming damage during these few seconds. Step 6. Kicking or jumping attacks. You aren't limited to just your basic light and heavy attacks. You've got 2 more specific tools in your combat toolkit. To kick, press forward on the left analog stick at the exact moment you perform a light attack. Kicking an enemy doesn't do much damage, but it does make them lower or drop a shield if they have one. An enemy holding up a shield can be hard to hit, so kick away the shield, then finish them off. The jumping attack is performed by pressing forward on the left analog stick at the exact time you perform a heavy attack, right trigger or R2. It uses more stamina than usual. You will leap toward your enemy and perform a powerful hit, often knocking them backwards. The jumping attack is a high-risk, high-reward move. By holding your weapon in 2 hands and performing a jumping attack, you'll likely hit the highest damage you can, but you'll be vulnerable during the jump and after the recovery. Step 7. Rolling. Rolling is great. It moves you around and helps avoid damage, but there are a few factors that affect the roll. Your worn weight, items you have actively equipped and not just carried in your inventory, play a large part in deciding how fast and effective your roll will be. A lower equip load, or a higher endurance stat, will allow you to fast roll while wearing armor. But as you approach your weight limit, you'll begin to slow roll, and then eventually the dreaded fat roll. Once you're above the equip limit, you won't be able to roll at all. It's now important to talk about the direction of rolling, because a lot of players die to this, and I'd like to help you understand why. When an enemy charges up an attack in Dark Souls, that attack is going to follow a certain arc. The dangerous bit of the weapon is going to go somewhere, either straight down onto the ground or around in a sweeping curve. If you decide to roll to avoid it, you must make sure the roll doesn't take you into the dangerous path. Rolling left or right is fine if the attack is coming straight down, but if the enemy is swinging from left to right, then a sideways roll won't help you. You'll still get hit. In this case, it's better to roll forwards or backwards. If the enemy has a long reach, then rolling away probably won't help you either. They'll still hit you. This means, often, rolling toward an enemy, despite feeling counterproductive, is actually the best way to avoid an attack. As you play more, you'll know what to look for from incoming attacks and learn where to roll to avoid them. It is possible to complete Dark Souls 1 without being hit at all. Step 8. Magic Combat. If you've chosen to play a sorcerer, you'll be relying on magic attacks to damage your enemies. Casting magic requires you to have a magical catalyst weapon equipped and a spell attuned and selected. Spells have a limited number of times they can be cast before you need to rest and recharge at a bonfire. Magic users have high damage output but very low defense. When you cast a spell, you'll have to stand still for a moment, so it's not recommended to do in the middle of a large fight or up close against an enemy. Most spells also have to physically travel to the enemy, and any objects or other enemies getting in the way will block the spell. Step 9. Ranged Combat. In Dark Souls 1, you can use a bow or a crossbow to fight with. Don't. Don't do this. Do not do this. Right, that's the basics of combat covered. Let's talk about death and bonfires. Death and bonfires. Scattered around the world, you'll find bonfires, small swords stuck into piles of ashes. As you reach them, you can light them and then rest at them. Bonfires are your checkpoints and are always safe. While resting at a bonfire, your health and stamina will be fully recovered, your Estus flasks are refilled, and you can spend any of your gained souls to level up your base stats. Each stat becomes more expensive and costs more souls to level up as your main level increases, so choose what to level wisely. While at a bonfire, you can also attune your spells or fix your equipment, provided you found or bought a repair kit. Bonfires might sound great. However, there's a catch. Every time you rest at a bonfire, every enemy you've killed, with the exception of boss monsters, will respawn. This means if you spend hours fighting your way around and then return to the previous bonfire and rest, yes, you'll get your Estus back and be able to spend your souls, but all those enemies you've killed will be waiting for you again. Dark Souls is a game about pushing forward against adversity, and returning to your safe place might heal you, but it won't actually make the way forward any easier. Bonfires also link heavily into the death mechanic. When you die in Dark Souls, and you'll notice I said when, not if, you'll be returned to the last bonfire you rested at. You'll be returned to full health as usual, but you'll notice a few changes. You will drop any souls you are carrying, and if you died while in human form, you'll be returned to the hollow form. This means death can be a huge loss, but don't worry, it's not all lost yet. When you die, you'll drop any souls and humanity you have on the floor. If you can return to where you died and claim it back, you can recover it all. However, if you die while attempting to reclaim it, then it will disappear from the game and be lost forever. Dying in Dark Souls is a lesson, each and every time. You will die because you attacked too soon, or didn't attack soon enough. You fell off a ledge, or got knocked into a pit, or didn't heal when you had the chance. Every death has a reason, and by understanding the reason, improving, and not making that mistake again, you'll push on and get a little bit further next time. Upgrading items. So you've got the item moveset mastered, know your weapons, and you're approaching combat with strategy. What else can you do to make life easier? Well, you can upgrade your equipment. As you play, you'll find upgrade materials called titanite, from small slithers to large slabs. Each weapon requires titanite and souls to upgrade. Weapon upgrading is done through a blacksmith or at a bonfire if you have the required upgrade kit. Upgrading a weapon will add a plus number to the end of its name, from +1 to +15, and increase its base damage and durability. The same is true for armor. Upgrading armor increases the defense it provides. Upgrading past certain limits will require certain special hidden materials called embers. Find an ember, take it to a blacksmith, and they'll be able to unlock its secrets and upgrade your weapons to higher levels. At the higher end of the upgrade paths, you'll be able to add elemental damage to your weapons, such as fire or lightning, or add parameter scaling to them so they do more damage based on your own personal stats. Scaling weapons tends to prove more useful in the long term, and elemental weapons are good for dealing with specific enemies. Upgrading your weapons or armor is not essential. The entire game can be completed using only your basic starting gear and some skill. The upgrade system exists to make it easier and to reward you for exploring. Spoiler-free story. The story of Dark Souls is incredibly convoluted and complicated. Not because there's so much going on, but because there's so much we're still not sure on. These specifics are kept deliberately vague, and some questions don't have answers, while other apparent answers don't seem to have a question to link to. So, in the least confusing way, here's what we're absolutely sure of, spoiler-free, in Dark Souls 1. The world of Dark Souls cycles between things being good or things being bad, often called the Age of Fire and the Age of Dark. Right now, it's the final few days of the Age of Fire. The Dark is fast approaching, and there's nothing really to stop it. You might or might not be a chosen undead, a human cursed with the Dark Sign, a special power that allows you to return to life after death and never truly die. Because you can't really die, the only way you can fail your journey to do anything is by giving up. Using this power, the chosen undead needs to ring 2 bells of awakening, one found very high up and one found very low down, journey through the land and light all the bonfires. Then find whatever thing it is guarding the first bonfire, known as the first flame, and help either keep the Age of Fire going or hurry the Age of Dark up. Your call whenever you get there. PvP. One of the most original, helpful, and harmful aspects of Dark Souls is the way other players will influence your journey, for better or worse. Dark Souls is an online game with seemingly no reason to be. You explore a vast, lonely world and don't have any need to interact with others. There's no voice chat or guilds or standard MMORPG stuff, but there are still other people around you. As you play, you may notice ghosts running around, humanoid shapes that phase in and out of existence. These are other players that you're seeing in real time. They may or may not be able to see you as a ghost in their game. As you play and get lost and suffer, remember, every ghost you see is just as frustrated as you are. Beyond just seeing the ghostly form of other players, you're able to interact directly with them in a few ways. The friendly way is being invited. Eventually in the game, you'll receive a white sign soapstone. This item allows you to place your summon mark down on the floor. This mark will then appear in other players' games. and if they're in human form, they'll be able to see it, activate it, and summon you to their game. You'll be placed in their game and able to attack all of their enemies and help them kill bosses. Once, however, the boss of the area is defeated, you'll be removed back to your own world. If you don't feel like helping someone, you can leave a red sign soapstone message. This will allow the other player to summon you into their world as a red phantom, and you can fight each other. The winner will claim the souls and humanity of the loser. But what if you're just focused on killing people and don't like the whole consent thing that the red sign soapstone provides? Well, eventually you'll find the cracked red eye orb, or the rare complete red eye orb. Using this, we'll search for any player in your level range, in your area, who is also in human form. It will then forcibly place you into their game world. While here, you'll be able to hunt them down and kill them. If you are ever in a human form and see the message appear on screen saying you've been invaded, this means another player is coming to kill you. PC invasion works slightly differently to console, and it's advised you research this and download the extra programs PvP Watchdog to prevent hacked or cheating accounts invading you and ruining your game. The chances are unlikely, but it's worth reading up on. Console players won't have to worry about this as much. Additional notes. That's the bulk of the guide done, but here are a few fringe situations and some helpful tips. The skeletons in the graveyard at the start are super powerful. How is this fair? Don't go there first. Go to Undeadburg, found by heading up the stairs to the right-hand side of the Firelink Shrine. How do I stop poison or toxic? To stop poison, simply use a purple moss clump item. To stop toxic, use a blooming moss clump. If you don't have these items and get poisoned, run back to a bonfire while drinking Estus. If you get a full toxic bar, just accept your oncoming death. Why is my health bar halved and my humanity symbol all stone-like? You've been cursed. High-level enemies like basilisks can fill the room up with dangerous smoke. Staying in this smoke will build up your curse meter. Once the meter is full, you'll turn into a stone statue, die, then return to a bonfire with the curse status effect. This halves your hit points bar and can be removed by buying a purging stone from one of several merchants. Fun fact, your cursed statue body will appear in other players' games. If you randomly see a stone-like statue of another player, it means there are basilisks nearby. I've killed an NPC. Can I get them back? No. Deal with their death and move on. You might have gained an interesting item from killing them, but you've also removed their questline from the game and have probably prevented yourself getting a better item later. Ending. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've made it this far through the guide, then well done. You now know everything you need to start your Dark Souls journey. You know how movement works, how combat works, how to evaluate and equip items, upgrade them, explore and survive PvP, how to parry and riposte, and how to level up. I haven't told you everything you'll experience because this is a game about discovery and adventure, but I've told you everything you'll need to survive. So go ahead and find the rest out for yourself. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any feedback or opinions, leave a comment below or come and chat to me live on Twitch at twitch.tv/Josh Strife Hayes. I'd love to know how your Dark Souls journey is going, and I'm usually streaming 5 nights a week. Have a great day. Keep an eye out for the in-depth combat guides coming soon, and don't you dare go hollow.